I said, I'm teaching music. Music is my language.
If you show up in a completely new place and don't speak the language, aren't familiar with the culture or customs, or know even a single person, can music be your gateway to an entirely different world? From my experience and that of many others, the answer is yes. And today we're bringing you a story of exactly that. I'm your host, Savannah Fortis, and this is Music on the Move. We're going to be traveling using sound and music back in time to when I first had the idea for Music on the Move and decided to test it out in the Kurdish region of northern Iraq. The voice you heard at the beginning of this episode is that of Mustafa Abbas Ali, or as we'll come to know him, the Maestro, as he recounted his life story to me in a classroom on the ground floor of his music school in the city of Sulaymaniyah. Mustafa is not just a musician, composer, conductor, and teacher. He is someone whose life vibrates a deeper love and understanding for music and its transformative powers of turning strange languages into shared ones, new lands to love soil, and most importantly, a life from almost ending to something completely reinvented. However, our story today starts a little before our meeting at the music school with the Maestro. I arrived in Sulaymaniyah after busing across the desert of northern Iraq from Erbil, the capital and largest city of the Iraqi Kurdistan region. Opposed to Erbil's massive boulevards, sprawling layout, and dusty desert atmosphere, Sulaymaniyah felt quaint and accessible, and slightly cooler. The city itself is not far from the Iraq-Iran border and is nestled between 4 mountains to the south and northeast and a set of hills in the west. I had been told by everyone I met in Erbil that Sulaymaniyah was the city of the arts, and it would be the place where I could find exactly what I was looking for. Although I had spent extended time in Iraqi Kurdistan in 2017 with a fellow journalist, this was my first time in the region alone and in this particular city. And in Sulaymaniyah, there was no one waiting for me. I had no contacts, no reference points, didn't speak any of the local languages, and had absolutely no plan. Just the desire to hear some music and understand its place in the lives of the people around me, to see my idea of music on the move in action. When I arrived in the city, I dragged my bags to the Dolphin Hotel and Hostel located smack in the middle of the Grand Bazaar. The Grand Bazaar is a microcosm of the soundscape of Sulaymaniyah, which spilled out from there and continued sonically decorating the city. The clacking of backgammon tiles tossed by old men in traditional Kurdish clothes, a chorus of horns from taxis, cars, and motorbikes, a cascade of adhans, the Islamic call of prayer from the many minarets scattered throughout the city, a flurry of swallows above the central square, the quiet shaking leaves in the city's public parks. The symphony of Kurdish life and the sounds that filled my days as I wandered around looking and listening for my musical story. My first few days, I started with the obvious options of trying to speak with the owners of the shops in the Grand Bazaar selling musical instruments, for which there were many. In fact, there was an entire corridor that sold musical instruments and gear, and on the other side of that corridor were small storefronts selling burned CDs of almost any type of music imaginable. My attempts over the next few days of trying to speak with shop owners resulted in kind but broken conversations, a few demonstrations of local instruments, and me purchasing a CD of what I learned to be contemporary Kurdish folk pop music. But where was the story? Where were the musicians themselves, or at least the interaction with music on a deeper level? Isn't it, as I believed, a connector that didn't require a mutual language or even much else? Normally, being alone in a new place, knowing no one and not speaking the language doesn't bother me, but I was beginning to feel a bit discouraged, maybe even that I made the wrong choice. But I believed in the principles of music on the move as much then as I do now and didn't want to give up. I wanted to leave Iraqi Kurdistan with answers, with the musical truth that I knew was waiting to ring out. So I decided to play a small game with myself in an effort to push myself a bit more out of my comfort zone. Whenever I had a question about anything music related, I had to find someone to answer that question. And that question couldn't be put to rest until it was answered. I needed to ask in order to receive, to speak my truth, to earn one back. That's when the real magic began. One day, I found myself in a local coffee shop called Jan Coffee. It was a colorful place off the main road that served coffees, juices, and giant breakfasts reminiscent of a trendy young spot in any European city. As I sat there and began to plot my next move, the song playing overhead in the cafe changed. I couldn't understand a word, but suddenly I was moved. It felt sincere, deep, sad, telling a story. It sounded local, Kurdish, I thought. It was the first time I really heard Kurdish folk music playing. Or maybe it was the first time I really started listening. What is this song? I asked myself. And so appeared the first question since the beginning of my new game. I gave in and let the question burn a bit. I really wanted to know what that song was. But who to ask? So I called the waiter over and presented him with my question. "Excuse me, what song is this?" The waiter smiled at me and said he didn't know and couldn't speak English really well, but his friend could probably help me better. And that's when I was introduced to Bahwan, a young student and musician who played a percussion instrument called the daf. When I asked Bahwan my question about the song, although he did speak English with no difficulty, it was as if a new language had opened up as he explained the song and a bit of its background, telling me it was by a Kurdish folk singer called Nechme Gulami. "Why were you listening to this song? What made you ask about it?" Bahwan was walking straight into my trap. I was here for music, I told him, for musical stories about Iraqi Kurdistan. Suddenly, my next question appeared. "Do you know where I can find one?" To my absolute surprise, Bahwan said he knew just the guy, the maestro. Bahwan told me he would arrange everything for me and said that he would call Mustafa, also known as the maestro, to set up an interview. He said he would even pick me up the next day to head over to Mustafa's music school called Music House. As excited as I was to meet the maestro and hear his story with music, I needed some background. Who exactly was this guy that I was going to show up and meet tomorrow? What do I need to know? So I sat down with Bahwan again for a little more information. He told me that their relationship went back before 2017, so more than 5 years prior at the time of the interview, and that he had been involved in an orchestra Mustafa was conducting.
He's really iconic, actually, for us as musicians in Suleimani. We go to him all the time as a source, or as someone who has a lot of experience about music and who plays a lot of different instruments and who actually memorizes all the scales that we have. And like, he's the most famous familiar face within us. We see him in each program, like TV shows. He was the conductor of Kurd Idol, and a lot of more TV shows that we see on Kursat.
But Bahwan said the most compelling thing about this whole story is that Mustafa is not even Kurdish. He's of Arab descent from Baghdad in the south of Iraq. He had internally migrated north to Kurdistan, and despite local acclaim for his knowledge and mastery of Kurdish folk music, it was only after he arrived in Kurdistan that he began to interact with it.
The thing is, he's from southern Iraq, and now he became a part of Soleimani's music, let's say. Now he has, he teaches a lot of students, he gives them lessons of Kurdish music, which is rare actually, to teach another style of music which is not yours.
The next day I met Bahwan at Jan, and we, together with a friend of his who had never met Mustafa in person but knew of him from his esteemed reputation with Kurdish music, all headed toward the music house. When we pulled up, a few young students with violins perched on their backs and their parents were saying what appeared to be their goodbyes to Mustafa after a lesson. The school itself was set inside a residential neighborhood and occupied a 2-story home with a gated yard and a rooftop terrace overlooking the surrounding area. Around the yard were little hand-painted murals of black cats laying on top of a musical staff and pawing at notes. As we approached, Bahwan greeted the maestro like an old friend and introduced the rest of us. Mustafa took us inside to a room on the ground floor of his music school, and everything started to unfold. Mustafa detailed to me his early childhood. Born in Baghdad, Iraq in 1976 to 2 musician parents, by the young age of 5, he was already presenting concerts and playing various instruments like the piano and oud. He was virtuosic in his pursuits. By 10, he traveled to Cairo and recorded music with the local symphonic orchestra. Later, Mustafa went on to study at the Musical Studies Institute in Baghdad, and then he attended the Fine Arts College of Baghdad University. He told me how he traveled to Europe, Paris, and Lyon, where he finished his master's degree and spent some years conducting orchestras around France. However, Mustafa's active, music-filled life took a sharp turn after he returned to Baghdad in the early 2000s at the onset of the US-Iraq War.
And then after 2003, I was
They took him as a prisoner.
By Shia militia because I'm a musician. They took me for 1 year. They broke everything, my hands, my legs,
They broke your hands?
Yes. So after that, they took about $20,000 to make me free.
My new friends explained to me that up until only a few years prior to the time we had met, life for musicians was very difficult in Baghdad and many parts of Iraq. Mustafa said the private armed militias that were rampant in the region at the time viewed music as haram or unacceptable. Artists, musicians, writers, and poets being exiled from their home country or under threat during time of political instability is a story that has been heard many times all over the world. Art and the people who make it are important in creating and preserving narratives of a community and place. Their absence is always palpable. According to Mustafa, in Iraq there were many cases of people being kidnapped for ransom for various reasons that didn't align with the militia's values. And in his case, it was due to his accomplishments and work as a musician. He related his living quarters while kidnapped as similar to that of a small bathroom.
1 meter, 2 meter, and we was 17 person for 1 year. No showers, no food. It was 3 pieces of old bread for all of us every 2 days. Yes, believe me. I was when they catch me, I was like 73 kilos. But when I came out, it was 32 kilos.
The conditions Mustafa described were almost unimaginable to me as I listened to him recount his experience. However, this seemed like a familiar story to Bawan and his friend.
When I went back to my home, I saw, a tazia, huh?
Yeah. Funeral. They made him a funeral at his house.
Even in the institute, because I was the manager of the institute, they made a big picture for me with the black stripe with the flowers and everything. Even my mom, she said, Mustafa, he's dead. When I went to mom, I said, Mom, I'm Mustafa. She said, no, you are not, because there was only the nose and the eyes. I have a long hair all the times, but with the 1 year, it's look like and the mustache is until here, the beard until here, and 32 kilos. It's very difficult to know me, but I have something here in my leg, a mark. I showed this mark to my mom, and she said, yes, this is Mustafa. From 2004, the last time I was been in Baghdad is 2005. Until 2019, in April 2019, they made it make Rezliana.
They honored him.
Yeah, in Baghdad. So they asked me to be in Baghdad. I went 2 days, but I didn't
stay.
Yeah, because all the faces are different, everything is different. So I went back to Slimani, and that's all. I will not go back to Baghdad.
After Mustafa was released from his imprisonment, he had to make a choice if he wanted to continue to practice music and carry on with his career that he had spent his entire life cultivating. He told me that migrating outside of Iraq wasn't really an option, as he had with him his mother and siblings. The only realistic choice was to go north to the Kurdistan region of Iraq. Now, to better understand this, and without going into too much detail, Iraqi Kurdistan refers to the Kurdish-populated area of northern Iraq. It is considered one of the 4 parts of Kurdistan, which stretches across Western Asia and also includes parts of southeastern Turkey, northern Syria, and northwestern Iran. In Iraq, however, Kurdistan is recognized as an autonomous region by the constitution and has its own government, laws, cultural norms, language, and music. So while it may seem like a no-brainer to move within your own country, in Iraq it wasn't so simple. For many years, the relationship between the Kurdish and Arab regions was very rocky. Around the time of Mustafa's story, the wounds were still fresh from decades of genocide committed against the Kurds by the former Iraqi leader Saddam Hussein. According to the European Union's Agency for Asylum, 182,000 Kurds were estimated to have been deported, killed, or disappeared in depopulation campaigns in Kurdish areas carried out by Saddam's ruling party. For many years following, and even today in some areas of the region, Arabic isn't spoken, only local dialects of Kurdish, and Arabs as a whole are sometimes looked on with skepticism. This was the case for Mustafa and his initial experience upon arriving in Kurdistan.
And then I came to Kurdistan, especially in Soleimani, in 2000.
Directly after?
Yes. 2004. Yeah, the end of 2004, I came to Kurdistan here. I didn't know anything about Kurdish language. I didn't know anyone here. You know, it's a new, especially because the language is different, so it's a new for me.
Bawan's friend elaborated on this with her own experience.
That at the time he is come to Kurdistan to live here, it was right when the fall of Saddam's regime, and because our parents were obliged to study in Arabic,
In Arabic,
and
yes.
Kurdish language was not allowed to even be spoken at the time of Saddam. So our parents made sure we did not even use Arabic words while we were speaking Kurdish daily.
There was nothing. For example, especially the young people, they know only Kurdish. There was no universities or institutes, language institutes in Soleimani when I came here. So the only the people was talking in Arabic, the old people, because they worked in the south of Iraq, or they went to army, the Iraqi army. So they learned Arabic, but they was talking, in very very sad, a very bad accent, of course.
At first, this was a major problem. As well known and praised as Mustafa was for his musicianship in Iraq, in Kurdistan it was a different story. To continue his musical career, he would have to start back at the beginning.
No one know me like a musician. I don't know any place to to work with them. For example, when I went to the first one to the Fine Arts Institute, they saw my CV. They said, "Oh, very good, but sorry, you cannot speak Kurdish because our students are Kurdish." So first time they said, "No, we cannot accept you." I said, I'm teaching music. Music is my language. They said, "No, our students, they cannot understand you."
So Mustafa took a job as a carpenter in order to make ends meet, but he was determined to continue with music and concluded that he needed to learn Kurdish in order to move forward. And that's when his own little game began.
So I tried to learn the Kurdish by myself. I learned the Kurdish by myself in 6 months only. 6 months.
Wow.
Yeah.
Through just conversation
Yes.
with people, determination.
Every day I went to bazaar, the market, the center, city center. I was walking and sitting in cafeterias like chaykhana. So I was listening to, for example, to 2 or 3 Kurdish persons talking to each other in Kurdish. So I was just listening. I take it like a music, like a melody.
Mustafa would walk home and repeat back to himself all the words and phrases he heard while wandering the bazaar. After 6 months of playing his little language games all around the city, fueled by his desire to continue his life's work in music, Mustafa went back to the institute and reapplied. And to the shock of the administration, his competency was enough to begin teaching, and he did. As Mustafa found himself in a new musical environment in Kurdistan, and as time began to pass, a new identity slowly started to take shape. The more Mustafa learned about the music of Kurdistan, the more he realized that he had been interacting with it for years, but he never knew that it was Kurdish music. He described how many of the folk songs he grew up with in southern Iraq had actually originated from Kurdistan or were even Kurdish themselves. He began to cultivate a desire to engage with Kurdish music more, and this took him beyond Suleimania and all over Kurdistan. He traveled to various regions within Iraq and neighboring countries to meet musicians and understand the small regional differences in the music. Over time, he even learned how to speak 7 of the 12 different dialects of Kurdish. He told me once he was in Spain as an attendee of a concert that was showcasing local folk music, And according to Mustafa, he was able to pick out a Kurdish dialect from one of the older songs being sung and present this knowledge to the singer who didn't even realize he was singing in Kurdish. Mustafa described Kurdish music as very deep, like the ocean, and said we couldn't even scratch the surface of it in 2 or 3 hours.
Every day I find something new about the music, especially about the Kurd. Because before I told you, I didn't know anything about Kurdish music, about Kurdish people, about, Kurdish geography, But now I know all the Kurdistan.
And for this, Mustafa started to gain local attention. He was invited to be a vocal coach and group conductor for the series Kurd Idol, a local televised singing competition. There were participants from all across the Kurdistan region singing local music in different dialects. Mustafa said he was able to talk with everyone directly and even act as a translator for some of the judges. He chose folk songs for participants and even made some contemporary arrangements for the program, like this one. Arguably his most important contribution to that series, and perhaps to Kurdish music as a whole, was that during his time at Kurd Idol, Mustafa said he wrote notation for nearly 1,200 Kurdish folk songs that had never been transcribed prior. Music now for Mustafa was no longer something that he did, but something that opened up an entirely different world for him. Kurdish music became his obsession, his passion, his expertise, and very quickly it became a major part of his mission in life. In 2009, Mustafa and a friend decided to open the Music House. The vision was to create a center where people of all ages could come and learn music, but more specifically Kurdish music. Due to the lack of local government funding, a place like the Music House had yet to exist in the area. But it was more than just a lack of funding on a federal level. Mustafa said that Kurdish music has traveled very far from Kurdistan because, in his understanding, the Kurdish people have continually been under attack from neighboring groups throughout history. He explained that as a people, they've always been migrating, going and leaving, so they never had the luxury to teach their music, let alone make a dedicated space for it. Mustafa explained this in his own words.
Especially in Saddam's times, it was very difficult. So all the Kurdish music we have it now, it's became from, for example, from Bawan grandmother or grandfather. Because all the folk music and all the words, Arabic, Kurdish, Spanish, maybe Mexican, maybe Brazilian music, came from the village, the farmers, when they working.
The ancestors.
Yeah. So they start to sing, to
Inspired them.
yeah. So because the war in this area, and like what I said, because Kurdish people, they was just leaving or running away from the war and from Saddam and the others, even the Iranian, Turkish. So they became, Tarbakarian now, Gorani.
What he's trying to say is that we have been in survival mode for so long that we didn't have time to give music, our music, what it's worth, and write it down and improve it. Mm-hmm. We had to fight for our lives and survive.
So now here in Soleimani, especially in Music House, I told all the teachers here and all my students, please keep studies and keep playing the Kurdish music. Okay, it's okay if you play Arabic, classical, maybe Indian music, it's good for you. Because when you play another music style or another folk music, you can find the difference between your music and the other music. But please keep playing or continue with your music. And that's what we do, especially in the music house, and what we want to do. Just keeping the Kurdish music, continue. Yeah.
He said that at the beginning of his journey with the music house, he was the one who had started off teaching all of the instruments available for lessons, including the Kurdish instruments. In the music house, students are able to receive one-on-one lessons for multiple hours and be tested on their progress every few months. Like all places where wonder is cultivated, libraries, art classes, music rooms, Mustafa decorated the music house with care and intention. Some rooms are dedicated to classical composers with plaques on the door reading the Mozart or Chopin room. Others have walls paper-mache'd over with old sheet music or music notes painted flying off of a scale. On one of the walls hangs the quote attributed to Plato, "Music is the movement of sound to reach the soul for the education of its virtue." The upstairs of the music house had a recording studio, which Mustafa set up using gear bought on a trip he took to the United States to attend a Kurdish folk festival. As a break from our interview, he took out a bowed instrument called the kamanche, commonly found in Kurdish folk music and other music in the greater region. In Iran and also Azerbaijan, the art of crafting and playing the kamanche was inscribed on the UNESCO representative list of the intangible cultural heritage of humanity in 2017. His own was beautifully crafted with an open back and gold floret-like embellishments around the main sound chamber. He treated us with the small snippet of a folk song from the neighboring Kurdish region in Iran called Loristan.
That's GG, GD, GD. So the same thing. It's a Luri folk song.
The music house became so successful, so sought after by the local community, that they now have 2 branches and around 26 teachers, 20 of whom Mustafa said started off as his own students. Mustafa said it is his honor to create such a space to foster and uphold Kurdish musical traditions. He said if it wasn't for Kurdistan, he wouldn't be thriving as a musician as he is today, or may not even be alive, period.
My wife, my daughter, my place, my orchestra, my studio. So I have everything here, and it's my honor to be in Kurdistan. Believe me.
And then Mustafa said something that made the room fall silent.
You know, in 2007, I became a Peshmerga, Kurdish fighter. From 2007 until 2014.
The Kurdish Peshmerga, which roughly translates to those who face death, makes up the standing military of the Kurdistan region. According to the Iraqi constitution, the Peshmerga and their security subsidiaries have the sole responsibility of security for the entire area. They were a key force against the regime of Saddam Hussein and during the period of Daesh, or ISIS, during the 2010s. Both Bawan and his friend became emotional, saying that not even some Kurdish-born people would voluntarily sign up to become a fighter. This means a lot, she said.
It's my honor. It's my pleasure to be Peshmerga because I'm living here now. This is my country. I'm drinking this water. This is a Kurdish water, a Kurdistan, a water from Kurdistan. So I'm eating everything. I'm living here. My daughter living here. I said that before, and I will continue saying that. If Kurdistan need me to fight, but I cannot fight, you know. Even when I was Peshmerga, I was like a translator. Sometimes I was making foods, cooking, to the Peshmerga. It was my pleasure because I cannot use any guns. Only the gun I know to use it. It's the instrument, musical instrument. But if Kurdistan need me, it's my pleasure because really it's my country. Believe me, it's the true, it's the real feeling I have it for the Kurdish people and for Kurdistan. Because when I came to Kurdistan and when I know that Kurdish people had a very difficult life. Sometimes with myself, I said, why the Arabic people did that, or why the Persian people did that, or the Turkish people? Because Kurdish, they are a human like us. They have the right to live like anyone in the world. So I will fight for them, for their music, especially the music, because this is my specialty.
Line of fight.
Mustafa said this understanding and reverence for Kurdistan and all of its history, the struggle of its people, the land itself, and especially the music, is what replays in his mind when new students come to his school and ask to learn. When students approach him with the desire to learn classical music or other regional music like Persian or Turkish, he said in addition, he has them undertake studies in Kurdish music.
Please learn how to play your music first, and then you can play the others.
Mustafa's dedication to Kurdish music earned him the nickname the Maestro among all the students in the region, and was the way Bahwan introduced me to him. And as I came to understand through our conversation, it was the most fitting name for Mustafa.
Music, it's everything.
It is.
It is everything. It is.
Without music, you cannot be a human.
After meeting with Mustafa, I had only a few days left in Iraqi Kurdistan and was electrified by my encounter. That feeling didn't leave me for days, weeks, months. Even now, years later, I still feel the joyful buzz from hearing about the impact and power music has in Mustafa's life. His story was a gift to hear, and more than I could have imagined that first day dragging my bags through the bazaar in Suleimania. His story answered my question without the slightest hesitance and with all the strength that yes, music can be a gateway to an entirely different world, and he bears the testimony. In the pursuit of this story, something was also realized, that in a meta sense, I was actively answering my own question. By playing my own versions of games when I felt stuck, I used music as a guiding force into a place when I didn't know the language, culture, landscape, or even a soul. A simple thing like a song guided me to a young man who was personally impacted by another man using music as his own means to continue his life's work. If music can prompt these serendipitous interactions, I'm convinced that it can be a catalyst for so much more. If only we engage with it. If only we truly listen to it. I'm Savannah Fortis, and that was Music on the Move. This episode would not have been possible without so many people, but a special thanks to Mustafa Abbas Ali, Bahwan, Awin, Sirwan, and their entire family for their hospitality in Erbil. Shah of the Dolphin Hotel and Hostel, Jan Coffee, and so many of the wonderful souls I had the pleasure of interacting with in Kurdistan. If you liked some of the music you heard in this episode and you want to hear more of Kurdish music or something similar, check out our playlist for each episode on Spotify. And visit the Music on the Move website for more details, photos, and additional materials related to the episode. Thank you so much for joining me on yet another journey. Stay tuned for more, and until then, keep your ears open, listening, and exploring. This episode was written and performed by me, Savannah Fortis, with sound design and original compositions by Daphne Farazi.